Good afternoon, everyone. I want to welcome you to today's program, Making the Most of Your Summer Associate Position, sponsored by the Committee on Legal Education and Admission to the Bar and the Committee on Continuing Legal Education of the New York State Bar Association. We encourage participants to pose questions to the speakers using the Q&A tab in the Zoom portal. There will also be a Q&A session at the end of the session. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to today's moderator, Kim Wolf-Price, who is a Director of Attorney Professional Development and Diversity Officer at Bond, Schneck & King, PLLC. Kim?
Thanks so much, Lynn, and thanks everyone for tuning in today. As Lynn said, my name is Kim Wolf-Price. I'm at Bond, Schneck & King, and I'm really excited about today's program, Making the most experience and opportunity, but of course they also provide some stress and anxiety for law students. So we're here to try to help with that, make sure some of the stress and anxiety can be put to the side and you can focus on how to make the most of the summer experience. Whether you're a 1L or a 2L, whether or not you have a post-grad position, we hope that you find the advice helpful, and if nothing else, that it calms your nerves a little bit and lets you see that you're going to make the most of it and have a great summer. All right, so I'm going to ask the panelists to first briefly introduce themselves, give some background so you know who's talking today. And I'd like to start with Mary Fitzpatrick.
Thank you very much, Kim, and thank you for asking me to be a part of this panel. My name is Mary Fitzpatrick. I'm the Assistant Dean for the Career and Professional Development Center at Albany Law School. I have been in this role for about 7 years. Previously, I was an associate director with the Career Center at Brooklyn Law School, a position that I held for about 7 years. And prior to that, I was a commercial litigation associate for a small law firm in Manhattan for about 6 years. I'm a graduate of Brooklyn Law School, class of 2000, and Binghamton University, class of 1997. I'm thrilled to be here.
Thank you so much. Thanks for providing that law school perspective. You have great experience, and everyone should go visit their career services office. That's just an important piece of this as well. All right, and next I'd like to ask Ayanna Thomas to introduce herself to the audience.
Good afternoon, everyone. Kim, thank you again for inviting me for this great program. I think it's a very important topic as we enter into summer associate season. Again, my name is Ayanna Thomas. I'm a partner with the law firm Bond, Schneck & King. I'm a new partner. I just became a partner actually in January 2023. And I practice folks in school law. I represent K-12 public, charter, and private schools, and also institutes of higher education as well, with all legal matters, primarily general counsel. And I also handle labor and employment work as well. For law school, I went to St. John's. I graduated in 2015. And for undergrad, I went to SUNY New Paltz.
Terrific. Thank you, Ayanna, and thank you for always saying yes when I ask you these things, and Mary as well. So thank you both. I appreciate it. And you've been on a recruiting committee for a long time, so you have some great perspective for the audience today. And last but certainly not least, Mary Jane Morley, who I got the opportunity to meet thanks to this program and thanks to Mary Fitzpatrick. Mary Jane, will you please introduce yourself to the audience?
Of course. Thanks, Kim. And thank you, Kim, for hosting the panel, and thank you, Dean Fitzpatrick, for inviting me. I'm a 2019 graduate of Albany Law. I'm currently an associate at Phillips Lytle, and I practice commercial litigation. I work out of our Buffalo office, but went to law school in Albany and went to undergrad in upstate New York at Clarkson University. And I'm thrilled to be here today.
That's fantastic. So hockey at Clarkson, even better. That's fantastic. I may have a brother who is a Clarkson alum, and I must always shout out Clarkson at any point in time. So thanks for.
It's always great when people know
joining us.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. That's great. And as Lynn said at the beginning, I'm Kim Wolf-Price. I have a very long title at Bond, Schneck & King, but I am a Syracuse Law graduate for law school and Colgate University for undergrad. I practiced law in New York City at a giant firm called Clifford Chance, and then moved upstate, practiced here for a bit. And then I worked at Syracuse University College of Law for a number of years, which is how I got to meet Mary and become colleagues with her. So, and now I've been at Bond for about 3 years in my role. So as you can see, we have a lot of the state of New York covered here. Right. So we have people practicing in Westchester and Buffalo. Mary's in Albany. I'm in Syracuse. Many of us have spent time in New York City. So we have you covered. Wherever you're going, we have advice that should be useful to all of you. So the theme, I think, is communication and connection. Those are the things you should think about as you go into your summer. You'll find that communicating with the attorneys that you work with and for, and making connections during your summer will help you succeed not only in this summer experience, but far beyond that in your legal career. So the panel is going to run through a series of common concerns, give our best advice on how to handle it, and also give you some general advice. I think I'm going to start here and say this, though. First, take a deep breath. It's all going to be okay, right? We know there's anxiety over succeeding in the summer. We know that really, if you put your best self forward, all will be well. So take some of that pressure off your shoulders, relax a little bit, listen to the advice, ask questions in the Q&A, as Lynn mentioned at the beginning, and hopefully we have a conversation here that you'll find helpful, and that you can keep that stress and anxiety level down and enjoy your summer experience, whether it's in the private sector, a large law firm, you're with a judge, it's your first summer or your second summer. So hopefully you'll find some good things to take away, and I'm confident you will, because this is a great group of panelists. All right, so Ayana, I'm going to go back to you. I think it might be helpful for the students to learn about the positions that folks held during their 1L and 2L summer. So can you talk a little bit about your summers as a law student?
Sure. So I just want to give us some back information before I answer the question. So one thing, I did not summer at Bond. I summered at Morgan Lewis my 1L and 2L year. It was a unique opportunity with the New York City Bar Association. That's why network is important. It's important to make connections. There was a program for New York City law schools. It was pretty extensive interview process, 2 rounds of interviews were allowed for all 1L students an opportunity to be placed at a big law firm. And it was pretty random. Like, you actually have a clerkship, you could place at a law firm, but primarily a lot of law firms participated in that program. And I was placed there for about, like, I want to say like 10 weeks. And I had a chance, I was in the labor and employment practice group. And after my 1L year, I was given an opportunity to return there for my 2L year. I realized I was more passionate about school law as opposed to strictly labor and employment law. And there's not many law firms in the area that actually practice school law, and Bond was one of them. And I'll talk more about how I connections and networks important later on, and how I was able to get opportunity to work at Bond. But also, once I graduated in 2015, I went straight to Bond. So I've been Bond my entire career, and networking is important, as we will talk about more throughout this presentation. Communicating is important, and it's making connections.
Fantastic. Thanks, Ayana. And I did remember that you didn't summer here. So I think that's an important note for individuals who are watching, right? Ayana's a new member of our firm and she didn't summer here. So see, you can make the most of all of your experiences. It's not something that has to be, I think, and this is a little off of what we were going to talk about, but Mary, when I was at a law school, everyone sort of, the tension around OCI is so high, and that if you don't get a job from that, all is lost. But I think Ayana just proved to us that's not true, right?
Yeah, 100%. I think there is a lot of stress that comes out of that and going through the process, but there are so many different avenues to pursue and so many different pathways to get to where you eventually want to be, right? A career is long, you know?
Yes. Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you. So Mary Jane, I guess the same question to you. Tell us a little bit about your 1L and 2L summer experiences, if you will.
Thank you, Kim. And I'm lucky because actually Dean Fitzpatrick helped me get both of these jobs. So I'm glad she's on the panel today. My first year, I worked at a small firm that actually merged while I was there with Rivkin Radler. So it was based in Albany. It was very interesting to see that whole process happen and kind of be part of it. And I kind of practiced in a bunch of different areas, some litigation, some tax work, a lot of work for different hospitals and healthcare agencies. I really loved that experience, and I actually still talk to the people that I worked with. That summer, I was the only summer associate, so it wasn't just my class. One of the partners had a child that was the same age as my child, so we became very close. I live in Buffalo now, she's still in Albany, but we probably talk weekly, not even about the law, but we have both actually, she's referred cases to me at Phillips Lytle, and I've referred people to her, even though she's moved on from that firm. So again, I think those connections are so important. That my second year, I interviewed all over the place, and Dean Fitzpatrick probably remembers that I was a little bit chaotic about it. I had a 2-year-old at that time, and didn't know if I wanted to go to New York City, didn't know if I wanted to practice in upstate northern New York. I had no idea. And Dean Fitzpatrick actually told me to just be myself and stop trying to be what I should be in an interview. So I came into Phillips Lytle pretty determined with my wedding rings on, sat down and said, I'm married and I have a 2-year-old. And the interview went very well, and I'm still there today. I had a great summer associate experience. I really liked my class, the different types of work that I did. I will say that I totally came into my summer thinking that I wanted to be a corporate attorney. And after the summer, I knew that I needed to be a litigator, that I had no interest in corporate law. So I guess the biggest piece of advice I would say is, if you're going into your position as a 2L or even a 1L, just keep your mind open. Like, you have no idea what will interest you when you're actually practicing law. And as much as, your first year courses in lawyering or legal writing kind of make you think you know what it's like to be a lawyer, you don't really know until you're actually doing it. And I will tell one more story because I just told Dean Fitzpatrick, but my mentor, my first year, actually yesterday, we took a deposition against each other. So the legal world is small. We only raised our voices a couple of times, but I just think it's really important to remember that, the legal world is small, and the connections you make during law school will last for your whole career.
Absolutely. Go ahead,
May I
Ma'am.
comment on that point? Because
Yeah.
that's very important. Mary Jane, thank you for saying that, because people forget like how small the legal world, doesn't matter like where you are in New York or outside New York, you may bump into someone that you know. Actually, I have 2 quick stories. One story, while I was attending SUNY New Paltz, I was in the residence hall, and I was actually, my next door neighbor was the current managing partner in my firm's New York City office, who I worked directly with for many years. So when she started off, she's like, "Oh, you went to SUNY New Paltz." She's like, "Oh, do you know my niece?" And I was like, "Wait, I do know her. Like, she lives right next door to me." So you never know who you may meet. And also, just recently, for New Year's Eve, I went to a resort in the Catskills, a spa resort, to like just relax before bringing the new year. I went to a restaurant. I was in so I can't remember the name of the area I was in, but somewhere in the Catskills area. And we went to the restaurant. It was me and my friend from law school. And next thing you know, somehow we started a conversation with a couple next to us. And the male was a St. John's Law alum. It was so random. Like, we're both from Queens, both were in the Catskills, like on a vacation. And next thing you know, it was a St. John's Law alum sitting right next to us. So you never know who you may meet or any time. So it's very important to maintain good connections and not burn any bridges with anyone as well.
Absolutely. Great points from both of you. And that it's important to not just make those connections, but to keep communicating with folks along the way and to keep those relationships going. I mean, in the most random of worlds, I took my son to the allergist, and he happens to be the younger brother of Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor. So you honestly never know who you might run into along the way. So, Mary, I'm sure that our summer experiences were both interesting, but maybe that's not why we're on the panel. So if you want to talk at all about your summer experiences, that's fine. But I really wanted to hope you'll also talk about some of the things you hear from students that are kind of causing anxiety about the summer. So whichever one you want to start with, or either.
Yeah, well, I'm going to actually start with the question of what are some of the anxieties that students are facing as they prepare for their summer experience. And I think this will not be a surprise to anyone because it's really become something we talk about a lot more than we ever did when I was in law school, for sure. And so one of the concerns that I hear a lot from students is something commonly referred to as imposter syndrome, right? How am I going to know that I fit in with this firm? How am I going to be able to do the work expected of me and feel like I belong in this space? And then related to that, how am I going to transition from this position of law student where, although the curriculum is rigorous, it's not the same as practice, right? So how do I transition from law student, where I can rely on my professors to teach me what I need to know and give me critical feedback, to the role of professional, where really I need to be self-directed and I need to think about how am I going to get assignments? How am I going to know if I'm doing things correctly? And how do I compose myself in a way that aligns with who I'm supposed to be in the space as a professional?
So stressful for students. I think they need to know everything. They need to know the practice area that they exactly want to be in. And Mary Jane just proved that theory wrong, right? Like, you have to be open. They think they need to know who exactly they are and act only one way. And that all plays into imposter syndrome. So I saw some head nodding during that. Does anyone want to comment on that, the point of imposter syndrome and that feeling that many people may have?
I'll just say, I think it never really goes away. You know, if you feel like that in law school, you probably feel like that in practice. But I hope that gives some comfort to people that are feeling that way. I think I was very scared. I constantly questioned, you know, how I got the job, or whether I was doing a good job, or if, you know, my peers from these higher ranked schools were doing a better job or were smarter. I think it's normal to feel those things, but you wouldn't have been given the offer if you weren't qualified to do it. Firms know when you come in as a summer associate that you haven't been practicing before. They expect you to act like a law student. I think just being professional and being yourself is really important, because as much as, you know, you want to get a job offer from the opportunity, you also want to make sure it's the right fit for you. And I think people told me that as a summer associate, but I didn't hear it. But your legal career is, you know, it's constantly said to me that it's a marathon, not a sprint. So go into this, your role, at whether you're a 1L or a 2L, with an open mind. Figure out if you like the firm as much as they're figuring out if you're a good fit, I guess is.
That is excellent advice. It's also whether it's a fit for you. Ayana.
Yes, and also as we talk about imposter syndrome, also as lawyers and also as law students, we're perfectionists. Like, a lot of lawyers, perfectionists, you know, we want everything to be right all the time. You know, you think that it's impossible to make mistakes, but mistakes do happen. It's okay. It's okay to make a mistake. You get up from it and learn from it. Actually, yes, partners are looking at how you handle mistakes. Do you take accountability? Do you find a way to rectify the situation? Do you find a way to problem solve? And acknowledge it. It's okay to acknowledge that you're wrong. It's okay to acknowledge that you didn't get it right. And, you know what, next time I'm going to do a better job and look at the fine details.
Absolutely. And even the best advocates, you'll hear them say sometimes, you know, in an oral argument or in a meeting, you know, I'm not sure on that. Let me look into it. Or would you like me to brief you on, like, provide further briefing on that? It's actually not expected, particularly for law students, that you know everything. Here's a little secret. That's why the billable hour structure in private practice is the way it is. That's why a new associate bills out at less, because it will take them more time to do the same thing. It's, you know, those aren't random numbers. Well, it feels like that to you maybe, but they're not random numbers. That's why that system is built the way it is, because when you're more junior, you have to dig into it. You don't have the experience. And I think the key point that you said is, it's how you handle it. people want you to come in with a solution. This happened, but here's what I think we can do. Here's what happened. Here's what I'd like to do next. Or here's what happened. Please, I'm not really sure how to fix this. Can I talk this through with you? But it's important to have that ownership in there. And I think, Mary Jane, you're right. There are still days where I'm like, are you sure you want me to do that? You trust me? Like, am I the right one for that? Okay. That imposter moment still comes up every once in a while that Mary mentioned, and it's okay, right? It's okay. Don't be so discouraged by it that you don't keep going. Another point that I wanted to just say here is that, or ask you about here is, Mary Jane, you mentioned like you thought you were going corporate and then it was litigation. Mary, is part of the summer not just to like solidify, but to cross things off the list, especially that 1L summer? Like, oh, I did that 1L summer and I definitely do not want to do that for the rest of my life. Is that part of this experiment too, this 1L, 2L summer job?
100%, 100%. And it's both the opportunity, if students can look at the opportunity as one during which they're expected to explore, right? It's not just about what they can do for the firm. It's also about them being able to learn about their own strengths and where their values are going to align, right? Because if a student is aligned with a certain practice area, that's the best outcome for all parties. And so the summer should be viewed as not just learning substantive law and learning process and learning the business of the firm, but also learning about yourselves, right? What hit and what missed. It's really important. So maybe as part of the process over the summer that a student could sort of incorporate into their own professional development is journaling a little bit. Journaling, really trying to take some time, carve it out, calendar it in, and reflect on what it is that you're learning about yourself through the process.
That's excellent advice. And I've often said that the lawyers that are unhappy are the ones that let their careers happen to them and don't take any ownership in that.
I could not agree with that more. I couldn't agree with that more. And I'll just say one more thing, just before we leave the topic of imposter syndrome, I want to offer this perspective that having some doubts about your competency is actually a good thing, right? Because it allows you to be really careful and it gives you sort of the time to stop and say, am I right about that? Right? Should I look into this further? And so I'm just gonna suggest that although imposter syndrome has many negative things associated with it, it is also not a terrible thing if it's giving you a little space to make sure you're doing the best work that you can be doing.
That is a fantastic point. I couldn't agree more. It's a fantastic point. It also, folks who question a little bit continue to learn. And if you're not continuing to learn in the law, then you're not doing your best, right? You have, like, the law changes all the time. So continuing to learn and to be open to other perspectives, that's the only way that diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging piece of this profession can move forward as well, right? Open to space to say, maybe my perspective isn't the right one here. All of that questioning, you're right. There are parts of imposter syndrome that are difficult. So if you can get past those, but keep that moment of inquisitiveness, that moment of maybe I don't know everything, that's a helpful piece. All right. So before we move on, is there any last minute comments before we move into sort of the more scenario based? Are we okay? All right. So we're going to move on a little bit. And if it works for all of you, I'm going to present some things that will likely come up and then ask you to discuss them. And the first one, I think, is assignments. It seems so stressful. If you'd had a job, in college or undergrad where you knew exactly what was coming next, right? Most people know, like, oh, I'm working on this, or people were cashiers, lifeguards, all of those other jobs. You knew what your job was. But when you're at a firm or a legal services agency, sometimes you're waiting to see what your next assignment is. And that can be a position that leaves everyone with a lot of stress. So there's a bit of a life cycle here. You have to ask for assignments, get assignments, and then complete assignments. So I'd like us to kind of walk through all of that. And Mary Jane, if it's okay, I'd like to start with you. What are some key considerations sort of in this assignment process?
I think the first thing to figure out is how assignments are given out as a summer associate. My first summer, it was very informal, and I had to go kind of introduce myself to the partners and basically ask them for work or projects. And that required me to kind of get out of my comfort zone and go ask people for work. My second year, it's kind of a bigger program and it's more formal, and it was all organized through kind of a coordinator that would hand out assignments to people who expressed interest in that area or who wanted to do that type of work. I think you'll find that out on basically your first day. Even if you are in a system where you have a coordinator, I would strongly encourage people to go and introduce themselves to people, either people that interviewed them or people that went to their law school, and say, I'm interested in your practice area. Do you have any work that you can break off or assignments that you could give to me? Once you get an assignment, something I did as a summer associate that I think that made a big difference is I just had an Excel sheet. I would write who assigned it, what it was, and the date that it was due. I kept that for the whole summer. So by the end of the summer, I could, see what I did, who I did it for, and know that it was done on time, which is very important. And then I guess once I got an assignment, especially if someone gives me an assignment, even to this day in person, I will respond in an email being like confirming that this is what we discussed. This is kind of the scope of the assignment and the due date is this time. If I can't get it done by then, I'll check in. I think that's all very, very important, especially as a summer associate, showing that you can kind of handle timelines, understand what someone's saying to you when it's not kind of written instructions, and it'll help you stay organized. And then ask questions for sure when you get an assignment. If you do not understand what someone is saying, you have to ask a question, because even as last summer, for example, summer associates would come to my office and say, I got this assignment, but I don't know what he's asking me to do. I wasn't in the meeting. I have no idea. I'm not even in this practice group. So let's call the assigning partner and figure out what we're trying to do here. And then the last thing I would say on that is, I think sometimes summer associates might think that, an assignment from a partner might be more important than an assignment from an associate and prioritize it that way. But before you do that, you need to make sure, because sometimes, an associate might give you an assignment that's from a partner. And also every person that you do work for, at least in my firm, evaluates you. And while, some people might have more weight than others, I know that every single evaluation is considered. So you want to make sure you're doing good work for everyone that gives you work. And I'm sorry, the last one, pay attention to detail. I think something that is overlooked sometimes is, it's very simple to run a spell check or grammar check through your Word documents, even in your emails. Make sure your citations they don't need to be blue booked, but I need to be sure that it's the right case that you're citing. If someone tells you to do something informally, that's fine, but still do a spell check, because I think, details matter in law practice, and that it's important to do that from the beginning. I'll stop speaking now.
No, that's great. I was going to say, and Mary's probably heard this too, but many times I've heard that they spelled the client's name wrong or the judge's name wrong. And that is just not your best foot forward. So check those names, that not only spell check, but check all those names, the names of the person you're sending it to. That's all great advice. So Ayana, you've been on the firm recruiting committee for a few years. Is there any other advice you'd give on the assigning process?
So Mary Jane gave all great points. Just some of the things that come to mind, because as she was saying, I had like these thoughts that came in my head midway. Updates. Make sure to update the signing attorney on what you're doing. If you're stuck, sometimes like maybe given a research assignment, you don't know where to start, or you're just finding the same response, the same case, but it's not really clearly answering the question that was posed to you. So it's okay to say, like, you know what, I'm in a rut right now. I just don't know where to go. Is there guidance I should look at, or another source I should look at? It's okay to ask questions. That's another thing. It's okay to ask questions, because, I'd rather someone not ask a question than not ask a question. And then, it's close to the deadline of the assignment, and then they should ask the question like a long time ago and they wait till the last minute, then we're missing a deadline. That's why it's important to provide updates, as you go. Like if you get an assignment, it's due within a week, try to update midweek and say, like, this is where I'm at on this, like, do you have time to discuss further, or is someone else I should talk to about this? So it's very important. Also, if you're meeting with a partner or senior attorney to discuss the results of your research or a real some assignment, or say if you're trying to provide counsel to a client, don't just always agree with what they're saying. I remember that's something I did when I was a first year. I was like, I had my own perspective on something, but I just agree with the partner because I thought it was the right thing to do, just to, because they're the partner, so they know what's best. But it's important to do your own analysis and provide your own answer. You can say, you don't have to say like, no, you're wrong, because it's completely inappropriate. But say, as I was researching, I did find this case, but I believe may support this argument, and I think we should consider this. And the partner or the senior counsel, whoever provided the assignment, will respect that. Like, no, I appreciate this person. They didn't agree with me, but they really analyzed the issue. They've had supporting arguments, and it makes sense. Sometimes we'll give you the credit and say, I'll go back to the client and say, I was looking at this, but guess what? Like Mary Jane's the one that thought about this idea, and that's a great idea, and I think we should move forward with it. And this way you have contact with the client. And so if you're hired after your summer associate program ends, and you're still with the firm, and that client may remember you, like, oh wait, I remember her. Like, she was a summer associate at the firm. So as again, you're building connections, because you never know, because the client may remember that. And then like, know what, the partner's not available, answer my question. Guess what? I'm going to call an associate directly, because I trust this person, I'll report this person, and I believe they're suitable to answer the question.
Yeah, that's awesome. And communication, you and Mary Jane, many of the things you brought up were about communication, like ask questions when you're getting the assignment if you don't know what it means. When you're communicate if you're feeling like you're just not getting it, especially during the summer. Assignments can be the I've always wondered assignments sometimes attorneys really wish they could get to this topic, really wish they've had this theory and they haven't been able to explore it. So it's the summer law clerks, summer associates that get the assignment. It might not have an answer. It may be really down a windy road, but so Ayana's coming to check back in, ask if you spent too much time on something. Would they like you to stop or go in another direction? And typically something to remember, if it's a specific area of law, if they already knew the answer, they probably wouldn't be having you look into it in this level of detail. So make sure, they may have a general idea, but they're counting on you to put it in an order to analyze it and to give it back to them. So communicate, stay in touch. That's just such an important part of the whole process. So Mary, we're talking about law firms because we have people who are at law firms now, but this type of advice, is it consistent for other legal employers as well?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that all of the points made apply to any legal setting in which you find yourself in your summer experience. And in fact, in some legal settings where maybe the employer doesn't have the same amount of resources in terms of supervision and assignments, it's even more important to seek clarity at each part of the project, right? I mean, it really makes a difference when you are strapped for time and you have a limited staff, that the projects are being moved forward in a way that is best going to serve the client. And sometimes that means going back a few times to make sure that you're on the right track. So I'll just reiterate, in any legal setting, aim to seek clarity and don't be afraid to ask questions, and understand that your supervisor doesn't know what you don't know. So don't make assumptions, and be really clear in your communication.
That's an excellent point. And if someone's been doing this for 20 years, they may think they've given you the full explanation because they're coming from it. Someone's just so absorbed in the work.
Exactly.
Yes, you have to take that moment. And for any of you, so it seems like with assignments, it's a key component of how the employer gets to know you, right? How they get to fully assess your skills and get to know you. It must be pretty critical to put your best foot forward. And Mary Jane, you hinted at this with the spell check, but it's sort of like your continuing resume, your assignments that you turn in. Is that a way to maybe look at it? It's got to be that level of detail.
I think so. And I think when I talked about the Excel sheet I had tracking my assignments, I think, actually, I know that firms also track the assignments you did and who you did them for. And they repeatedly ask for feedback if you forget to give it when you assign it. So I think that, yes, every assignment that you do, someone is going to give feedback on it. It is, like you said, not finding an answer isn't the end of the world. I have 2 things I'm saving for summer associates right now that are not time sensitive, and that's a common thing that happens. But doing your best work is very important, and having a good attitude about it too.
That's an excellent point as well. Ayana or Mary, anything that you would add?
Just one thing that I was going to save it for my closing, but I think it's appropriate to say it now, that it's important to remember that the partner or the supervising attorney is a client. So you want to put your best work forward, because at the end of the day, they're the ones that be making a decision whether offer should be extended after law school. So you want to produce your best work, make sure you follow up, communicate well, because your job is to impress them and show them why you're worthy of getting a long-term position at the firm.
Yeah, absolutely. So when folks graduate and come back and start, that's sort of part of my role here at the law firm. And one of the things that may come up from time to time is that people they act like they're still in law school and it's an assignment and check. I completed the, Thursday, March 30th homework, check, done. And that people are treating assignments that same way, but there's very little in the law that's fully a check and it's done. There could be a next part of the matter, a follow-up question, more work you can get from this person. Do any of you have advice on that? Mary Jane, do you have advice on that? Like just thinking like, check, this is done, I'm moving on.
Yes, I actually did that as a first year. I had an assignment to research this kind of niche area that we were putting in a motion for summary judgment. It wasn't on the case. I didn't know the deadlines. I gave the research, and then a week or so later, I went for a walk with my dogs without my phone. And I came home, and this is not normal. So do not be scared about the practice of law. I normally walk without my phone. But I came home to a bunch of missed calls and questions on the research. And I guess the motion was due 2 days later or something. And they were panicking because something I did was unclear, and someone was going on vacation. I had no idea when it was due or what it was, but that was kind of a quick lesson of, oh yes, this is not school. I don't hand it in and wait for a grade. I should have followed up and been like, hey, when are we submitting this? Are there any more questions? And I think, we have, when you get an assignment, if you really take ownership of it, whether you're summer or first year, if you take ownership of it, if you follow up, you're more likely to keep getting work on that case. Now that I'm assigning stuff, I frequently work with people that follow up and say, oh, that was really interesting. What's happening in this case? Or they help me prepare for a deposition and they say, oh, can I watch it? Like, yeah, let's ask the partner and come sit in on it. Showing that you're really interested is very important. As a summer associate, you're not really responsible for having billable hours. Ask to do those things, right? If you help someone with something and they're going to court or they're going to see a client, you can ask to go, right? Don't be scared to do that. I think getting those opportunities as a summer is huge and will really show you what practicing is like. So I would do that.
And it helps you be more invested and enjoy what you're doing more because you
Yes.
see the rest of it.
We had a summer that started this fall that helped me. I guess it was, I don't know, 2021, the summer of 2021, and the case is still going. And now he's on it, right? He's the
Yeah.
person that all the work goes to. So if you like the person that's assigning the work to you, to keep that relationship, because then you'll get more work from that person.
I think deadlines are another issue, certainly for new attorneys and for summer law clerks as well. So there's a few different ways to ask this. Ayanna, I'll ask first, like, what if you think you can't meet a deadline? Like it's becoming clear to you that they said they needed this Tuesday and it's Monday night and you're not, it doesn't seem like it's possible.
Communication, again, like the theme of this.
Yeah.
Of this program is communication. Like make sure you explain that to the supervising attorney you're working with, and maybe that someone else can help you with the assignment or can ask somebody else because they want someone who's committed, who's able to handle the work, and make sure you give them adequate notice, adequate time to figure out if this assignment should go with someone else or you can continue to work on assignment. Also, there's situations where you have two supervising attorneys giving you assignment at the same time, deadline at the same day as well, that comes up. And to handle a situation like that, I would recommend that you speak to both attorneys and say, I have the same deadline for both assignments. They both require a lot of work. What's the best way to handle this? And typically the supervising attorneys will talk amongst each other and figure out which one should take priority. But again, like communication is very important, and it's got to just be open and honest about what's going on.
And you can't expect the other partner to know that the first one gave you the same deadline.
Exactly.
So you have to be able
to want to assume.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, I think that's a big piece. And I don't know if Mary Jane, if you have anything to add, but a lot of times juniors or summer law clerks, summer associates are like, I got three assignments from different people and they're all due the same day. What do I do? And it's not panic and run away, right? That's not the correct answer. Mary Jane, do you have any advice that you would give?
I think Ayanna, she said it so well. That is, just communicate with everyone. And it does happen, I think, a lot, but making sure that people know what's on your plate is important. And if you don't know how to negotiate or how to discuss this, go talk to, especially as a summer, any associate and say, hey, I have this assignment for this person, how do I approach them and how do I not upset anyone that I'm not, prioritizing their work. So I think that's important.
And just one quick note, I just thought about this, like even today, like I mentioned before we started this call that I'm covering for a partner who's on vacation, and something popped up where I wasn't sure it's an emergency or not. So I asked the partner's admin to say, is this requires immediate attention or can I, call back after end of the panel? So it's important even with clients, like some clients may have a need at the same time. And it's very important to communicate, whether the issue is urgent or if they need more time. If it's urgent, then, I might have to hop off or have someone else covered for me. That's why it's also important to talk to your colleagues in your office as well, because they may be able to help you. Like the summer associates in your office are your friends, because maybe they had a similar assignment already and they already covered it, and they may know how to get you to answer more quickly as opposed to starting researching from scratch. So it's also important to not just build relationships with the partners, the supervising attorneys, but also the summer associates as well. You don't know where they're going to end up. They may stay at the firm or place of employment you're working at, may end up someplace else, and they may need you for something that's a referral. They could possibly be a new client. You never know where they may end up.
Absolutely. And you mentioned something there just inadvertently, the support staff at wherever you're working, know who the administrative assistants are. And frankly, they're huge at training you how to do some of these things. Like when you don't know how to use the office equipment, or you don't know the way this particular partner likes things done or handed in, that's a great to use your resources all the time. And obviously be nice to everyone, but make those connections as well, because I will say even at my the largest law firm I've ever worked for, we would ask the reception desk, so how were the candidates today? Anything stand out? So it all matters, right? Everybody's on a team when you're at a legal employer, whether it's a DA's office, legal aid society, or a law firm. So, or anything in between. So it's a team, and everyone wants their team treated well. So use the resources on those teams. Mary, we keep talking about communications, and lawyers have to communicate effectively, but so do students and new attorneys working for supervisors. Do you have any thoughts you'd like to share on that topic?
I think we've covered so many great points around communication, right? So if I was just going to summarize sort of what I've been listening to and just maybe hit it home one more time, is seek clarity. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't make assumptions about what people know and don't know about you or your work. And make sure you're listening, right, actively, not just waiting to respond, right? We all know about active listening and the difference between active listening and waiting to respond. Stay curious. And if there's one thing that I think probably is a stumbling block for students as they enter the profession around communicating, it's probably fear and intimidation, right? It's easy to say all these things that you should do, but you're coming out of law school, you really don't know a lot about the practice of law, and you're working with people who are very accomplished, and in that way, whether they intend to or not, can be a little intimidating, right? So what I will offer to you as a student and new professional is people expect you to ask questions and be communicative. So maybe approach the summer or whatever work situation you're going into with the mindset that I'm expected to be communicating often. And if I'm not, that's probably going to raise more questions than if I'm being transparent and I'm communicating often.
That's excellent summary, and that's great advice. Question if you've been too silent too long, because you're supposed to be engaged.
Exactly.
So this is an area that you mentioned, fear. So I know that this is tough for some people, but it's asking for work. So just quickly, if you have advice on so there may be an assigning process, or there may not be. Even if there is an assigning process, you really may want to work on a mergers and acquisition deal, but you're just getting trust and estates work. So sometimes you have to go ask. And it's not easy for everyone. Some people are introverted. Other people just don't like to, they always feel like they're bothering an attorney if they go in and ask for work. Do either of you, Ayana, Mary Jane, have advice on how do you go ask for work? Ayana.
I would say first do your research. So sometimes you may be working at a big law firm and you're not introduced to everybody, so you don't know what everyone does. Go start off on the firm's website, because that's your best resource. It's a particular practice area they're interested in, and search for attorneys that work within that particular practice area. Or sometimes the firm bios will connect you to articles or any webinars that the attorney worked on or was on, and that's helpful to just gather information about that particular attorney, because honestly, attorneys like hearing about themselves. They like to hear like, oh wait, so you did research.
Not wrong.
Wow. Like, yeah, it's like a wow factor for them. Like, wow, you did research, you looked at my art, you read my article, you looked at my webinar, and they become interested in you sometimes simply because like you did research on them, because they're impressed, because it shows that you're intentional. Like you're coming to this program, you have an area that you're interested in, and you're looking to find by any means necessary to find work in that particular area. And it makes you more comfortable too. Once you know more information about a particular subject matter, or you did extensive research, you feel more comfortable talking to that person about them. And also it's something to talk about, right? Because you say, oh yes, you went to this law school, I went there too. Like there's a lot of conversation
Right.
people can start by simply researching the person that you want to work with.
That's excellent advice. Mary Jane, anything you'd add on the getting over the go ask for work?
Yeah, I think especially if you're in person and someone's door's open, always stop by, introduce yourself, and doing the background research on. I completely agree. Like that's such a good idea. Going to the website, figuring out, all of that. But something that I noticed when I'm more likely to break off work for someone is if they, come say something to me in person, introduce themselves to me, but then follow up with an email. Say it was great to meet you, just wanted to follow up and see if you have anything that you can piece off or anything I can work on. if I'm in the middle of something and someone asks, I never have anything I can give away. But if I think about it and then they ask me after, I can. Another thing that this happened last summer, I thought it was such great initiative. I am really interested in New York's legalization of cannabis, and there's constantly news coming out about it, but I have to work, right? So I can't constantly be writing these articles that I would love to be writing, or attending these meetings that I would love to attend, and kind of getting that insight. We had a summer associate say, I noticed you write these articles. I'm really interested in this practice area. Can I help you with that? And it was amazing, because she was able to attend some of these meetings, attend some of these events just virtually that I didn't have the time to do. And we gained insight, and that helped our clients. So that initiative, I think, is huge. There's a lot of emerging areas right now, cannabis, Bitcoin, I'm sure
Data privacy.
Yeah, there's a ton. So pick an interest, if you have one of those interests, even better. But firms want to get client alerts out. They want to be on top of relevant news, especially in niche practice areas like that. And showing that initiative is great. And at least where we are, as summer associates, this is something I should have said earlier too, is that don't worry about whether your work is billable or not. It should all be good, right? Don't think, oh, this is just an article draft. I don't have to try as hard as on a demand letter. That's not true, right? They're all being evaluated the same.
Right.
When you're a summer, it's all the same. I would make sure not to, prioritize because one is billable. It's more important. If someone gave you an assignment, it's important.
Absolutely. And all of those things that you mentioned are great to keep an eye on, or, the circuits, any decisions that might be coming down, the National Labor Relations Board, if there's a GC letter or anything else coming in, whatever your area is, there's something that you can keep an eye on that would be really helpful. That's great advice. So Mary, I think that students, of course, it's the next job or the job that they think of as the takeaway. But there are other really important things that if you go into the summer thinking about, you can take away as well. Do you want to talk about some of those items that may be helpful?
I think the whole experience is helpful, right? I think just going back to something that we mentioned a little bit earlier, it's not just about the substantive knowledge that you're gaining. It's also about what you're learning about yourself through the process, and the connections that you're making, how you're forming your professional identity, who you are going to be known as a future professional, right? What people are saying about you when you're not in the room, right? All of that is incredibly important. You're building your reputation, you're making connections, you're learning about yourself. And I think viewing it as a holistic process unto itself, not just a stepping stone to something else, right? It's sort of bringing yourself into the moment and trying to get as much from the experience as you can while you're living the experience.
That's such good advice, because sometimes we're just so worried about the next hurdle. We're not in the space we are in right now and fully taking a look at it. So that's fantastic advice. So I know we're kind of running short on time, but networking, everyone dislikes the word when I say it, but it matters in the law. And we've talked about making connections, right? And that's another way to think about it, just making connections, connecting with people. So whether you're trying to get a post-grad job or summer, trying to find your next job, I think you've heard already examples of how those connections come back. Maybe you're deposing your former mentor, or in a deposition, against a former mentor along the way. So it's important to keep those connections. Ayanna, what does networking within the current employer look like during your summer?
So I know sometimes a lot of summer associates get bogged down with the workload. And I know sometimes workload can be an issue because it's hard to manage sometimes. And it's important to communicate with the coordinator you're working with. If you have too much work or you don't have a lot of work, make sure that you're in constant communication. And also, sometimes firms have events, they have happy hours, they have trips and outings, and that's the perfect opportunity to network, to get to know other attorneys that you may not work with on a day-to-day basis, you may not see on a day-to-day basis, and to make time for it. That's another thing, like, people forget that you can do a lot of work, and it's also when you as a lawyer, even as a law student as well, say if you haven't secured a job after law school or anything, that it's so important to develop connections. To work, networking is just as important as doing the work. And you can't get work without building the connections. And
That's
also,
great. Yeah.
and also one other thing, professionalism is important. Like, sometimes you hear stories where law students are getting drunk at events. Like, make sure you're professional. Make sure you control your alcohol limit. If you know you can't handle a lot of alcohol. Unfortunately, lawyers like to drink, and they will drink for long hours, and they drink as a way of camaraderie, but make sure you know your limits. You don't want to embarrass yourself at an event.
Right. It's just a summer long job interview or connection. And you always want to make sure, as Mary pointed out, you're building your brand and who you are as a lawyer. So make sure you keep that in the front of your mind at these events. They're colleagues for 30 years. You're the new person. So they have a little sense of that in space. So Mary Jane, do you have advice for students on how to weave in networking and getting to know people? Are depositions and other things you mentioned ways to sort of do that really sort of easily within the day?
Yeah, I think, we love when the summer associates are here. We look forward to it. We have happy hours, we have events, we have softball. The firm is excited for you to be there. I think take advantage of that. Something that I didn't do as a summer associate that I regret still is they had a day where the summer associates just went golfing with a retired partner, and I didn't do it because of work. I don't even know what I was working on now, right? But I know that
Yes.
I wish that I had gone golfing. So I think those things, if there's an event planned for you, yes, go to it, and yes, be professional. Like, everyone will know if you weren't professional. That's the reality, right?
I can say for decades, as someone who was a summer decades ago.
Yeah. Yes, everyone will know. Even if you're out with associates and it's not a firm event, just be careful. Like, watch your alcohol intake, be responsible. Associates are going to talk if you didn't. That's the reality. And I hate to say that, but that's what will happen. So yeah, as mentioned, know that, all of your behavior, not all of it, don't get overwhelmed with it, but be professional. Sorry. Yeah.
No, it's absolutely right. You have to be professional, and there's different ways that you can network. And Mary, alumni in your area, bar associations, other groups, they all play a role here, and students can network over the summer with them as well, can't they?
A huge role, a huge role. I think Ayana talked about it a little bit at the start of the program, where she said she ran into a St. John's alum at a Catskills retreat, right? And I know, and Mary Jane knows really well, that the Albany Law Alumni Connection is phenomenal, right? So, and there are ways to get involved with the profession outside of the firm. And I'll just give a big shout out to the New York State Bar Association. So many committees, right? So if there is something that piques your interest and you want to show a partner you're interested in an area, become a student member and join a committee. It's a great resource. And so there are also local bar associations that also serve those same purposes. Don't be afraid to reach out. I have rarely, if ever, I'm going to say never, I've never reached out to an alum to ask them to provide advice or mentorship for a student and had them say no. It just doesn't happen.
Yeah, right. And as Ayana mentioned, all of us are lawyers, so I can say this, we like talking about ourselves. We like talking to students. We love to see the next generation, right? So that's part of it. All right, so we're being conscious of everyone's time. We're going to cut here to maybe your last few bits of advice that you'd want to give before we sign off. So Mary Jane, would you like to go first?
Ayana actually kind of mentioned the one that I had planned earlier, and that was that your summer associate class is such a good resource. You're all going through the same things. As she mentioned, not everyone is going to stay at the firm forever. Maybe people won't even come back after their summer. And, as we said, again, the legal network, the legal community is so small. Keep those contacts. I still have a group chat with people from my summer associate class, and they're at firms in DC and Boston and New York City. So those connections matter. When you're stressed about something, they're going through the same thing. Talk to them about it. And then if you're going to a firm where there's alumni from your school, like you said earlier, reach out to them. They know you're coming. I know who's coming from Albany Law this summer, and I'm excited to work with them. I'm excited to work with all summers, but particularly, I can't wait to meet the people that, came from the school that I went to. So use that network. And then I had one more written down. Yeah, just build the relationships and really get to understand and figure out if the firm that you are at during your summer associate experience is one that you want to go back to. Remember that, as much as they're evaluating you, you're evaluating if this is where you want to go. I think that's really, really important. And then practically, if you're going to be doing any research before you come and you use Westlaw, ask them to do a key training, because your research time will be cut in half, and it's very, very important and very helpful.
That was all excellent and practical advice. Thank you. Ayana, what would you add?
Yes, I share a lot of the same sentiments as Mary Jane, but I know we're running short on time, so I'm going to keep it brief. But one thing that's at top of my list is have a positive attitude. Like, coming with a negative attitude, you get negative results. So we come in a positive attitude every day. I'm gonna have a great day. I'm gonna get great work. I'm gonna have a fun time this summer. Keep that same positive mindset. Be intentional. Try to seek the work that you want, and you'll have a fabulous summer. Or things will work for you. Things work for you when you have a positive mindset and positive attitude. Also, like, as we've been saying, like, throughout this presentation, network is important. I'm on a recruiting committee, and I typically only interview those who went to St. John's Law School. And that's typically the case of where for other law firms as well, where they pretty much match you with students at your alma mater. So it's important to build connections. And also sometimes career service will have a list of all the alumni from a particular firm, and reach out to them before your interview. Like, set up a mock interview with the attorney. I've done that. I actually do those as well for St. John's Law students now, and I'm happy to do them. Like, alumni always love giving back. They love trying to help the next generation of attorneys. So don't feel bad asking. Sometimes we do forget. I know sometimes I'm like, oh my God, I felt bad. Like, I did see your email. I hadn't back my mind, but I forgot. It's okay to reach out again. I love you reach out again. Like, thank you. You want me talking this panel at the law school and I forgot about it. You sent me a message again. Yes, please do that. I'm not annoyed with it because I do forget. And thanks for the reminder. So I just want to wish everyone the best of luck this summer. Just do your best work, have a positive mindset, and also remind yourself that how important it is to maintain connections.
That's excellent. Thank you, Ayana. And Mary, anything that you would add?
I think Ayana and Mary Jane have covered everything so beautifully. I'm going to add one tiny point, which is just remember, you're not expected to know everything. Just remember, right? Give yourself grace. Understand you're there to learn, to develop yourself, and to be developed as a professional.
Absolutely.
And I'll echo what Ayana said. Have a great time.
Absolutely. Enjoy it. And since I will say, I suggest you go to your career services office often, get to know the team, because really some amazing professionals in career services offices, great resources. Talk to your alumni, as everyone has mentioned, and your recruiting team at your employer, if you have one, whoever interviewed you at the beginning. Stay in touch with that person as well. It's communication and connection, and you really have some great opportunities. And we know that, like, it's stressful, but you're going to do a great job. So we didn't get any questions along the way, but I think maybe if anyone has one now, give you another opportunity before we wind down. So whether you're watching this recorded or you're with us live, we hope you found some great resources here. Join bar associations. Here's my plug as the incoming chair of the Women in Law section of the New York State Bar Association. Join a section, get involved. There's really great opportunities, and it seems like you don't have enough time, but you'll find some really wonderful people along the way, and it'll really enhance your career. Right, that was my typical use up some time to see if anyone asked a question that I used to do when I taught classes. So I want to say a special thanks to Lynn from NYSBA for getting us all together today, to Ayana, to Mary Jane, and to Mary for saying yes and providing really wonderful information. So thank you all. I'll turn it back to you, Lynn.
Okay, thank you so much, Kim, Mary, Ayana, and Mary Jane for this wonderful program. And now to our participants, for a complete list of upcoming events and law student resources, please visit nisba.org/law students. Again, thank you so much to our panelists and attendees, and thank you for choosing New York State Bar Association programs. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you too. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Mary Jane.